Hello and welcome to Champ Select, your go-to competitive Legends of Runeterra podcast. As per usual, I'm Alex. Joining me are my two co-hosts, Noble.
Good morning.
And Hugh.
Hello.
And today we are here bright and early on our Sunday morning after the launch of Empires of the Ascended, recording a little earlier than we normally do because me and Noble are heading out of town later this week. So vacation, baby.
Woo woo.
Time to get away. So we're going to be going over our Empires of the Ascended first impressions, basically. Yeah, we want to talk about what we've thought so far, and then we're going to be going into a topic that we've talked a little bit about in the past, but people seem really interested on, and we promised we'd do a longer episode, and that's how to improve as a player. And I know that we've talked about this a little bit, but we keep getting asked about it, and we keep having things to say about it. So, if you're looking to set goals for Empires of the Ascended, the new season, anything like that, improving yourself is always the number one goal and always the best path to reaching your goals, I think. So I think it's really important to talk about. We finally found enough time with, the end of the seasonal tournament, and the new set came out now, where I think we'll be able to spend a little bit of time talking about that. And last but not least, we'll get into our listener questions as per usual. But without further ado, let's jump right into our first impressions for Empires of the Ascended so far. I mean, I know a lot of decks have emerged pretty quickly, as per usual. Concurrent timelines, Lysandra decks. What have you guys been playing?
Yeah, I started out with a slew of brews.
As you do.
Playing some Jarvan Renekton. That deck's pretty good. I was just really impressed with the vulnerable package in Shurima in general. Renekton was really, really good for me and for my opponents in the first 48 hours of the patch, but I've been seeing it less and haven't been playing it recently. So maybe it hasn't held up.
I don't really know if that's because it isn't that good, but it isn't really nearly as sweet as all the other decks. So maybe we'll see a little bit of a resurgence as a little bit more time passes and people get over the sweet bad decks, if they're bad, that is.
That's fair, yeah. I've ground a good amount up with Lysandra Trundle. That deck is very powerful. It's just a classic Shadow Isles control deck, more new and improved with more and better sweepers. I don't know if better, but there's more.
There's a lot more of them, that's for sure.
And Lysandra has mega impressed. We talked about it. We were pretty low on it when she first got spoiled. And I'll be honest, I do think that card doesn't read particularly well. The card's just so weird. It has tough, which we don't usually see on 2/3s for that cheap, and then it just also has it creates an ice shard in hand. She has a weird champ spell and creates a thing when you play her and creates the Watcher. There's just a ton of random words on that card.
There's just so much going on.
Not doing things that the game normally does or has done before.
If the card just said 2 mana 2/3 really good against aggro, I think we all would have been this card's pretty good. But we all got a little caught up in all the other words, but it really does just say 2 mana 2/3 really good against aggro. Or 3 mana, sorry. 3 mana 2/3 really good against aggro. And it turns out that's pretty good right now.
Yeah. And that's another thing is that Shurima is very, very aggressive. The Hecarim Azir decks, Lucian Azir. Azir has performed like we kind of expected.
Yeah, he's been really good.
Yeah.
I've seen a lot of Azir floating around.
I'm not sure if the decks themselves are going to be tier 1, but Azir has definitely looked pretty good in them, especially with scouts or or Shark Chariots, kind of the two little synergy packages there. I've also played a little bit of LeBlanc Sivir, but I think Hugh definitely has more deck reps on that deck if he wants to.
Yeah, I played a decent amount of that deck. I just think the deck is very powerful. It feels like it has very stratified matchups. There's some things that it feels like it just will never beat ever, like the card Avalanche.
Yeah, that doesn't sound particularly beatable.
Yeah, and it's absolutely crushes other things. It's just when you have a bunch of 2 and 3 mana 5Xs, just 5 power creatures, you can put 1/2 drop down and they'll die from the one. One Treferian Glory Seeker will kill you if you don't
Absolutely.
anything.
Yeah, I mean, you have to deal with every threat.
And LeBlanc is the same way. Like, just 5 power is just such a massive, massive stat line, even if they're easy to kill.
Reputation has been pretty easy to turn on.
Yes, it has.
Yeah, definitely.
Much easier than I expected.
And the spell shield units have been as good as expected.
Really
Rune
good.
Runner is
Overperformed.
really, really good.
Rune Runner has absolutely impressed.
And Sivir impressed too, honestly. Doesn't
Yes,
die to
but we
Avalanche
kind of.
and, like,
I mean, we kind of expected Sivir to impress because
Sivir just read so well.
Yeah.
Yeah, so there was no real shock. It's whether or not she would really find a home, I think, for most of us, which I think is the case for a lot of these cards, is usually, are they going to find a home, not are they objectively powerful? Because like a lot of the cards that really haven't, found to that place, like I'm thinking like Talia or whatever, like nobody's really tried to make a Talia deck, or at least none that I've seen, right? So they haven't been all that successful, even if they had. And we thought that card it's pretty powerful, like it's relatively easy to flip. Its flip side is really good. But it just turns out the landmark thing is like a little too cute and bad or whatever, which I guess we also kind of probably thought was going to be mostly true. So
yeah.
It's still early. I think Talia could absolutely find a deck. It's just like someone's got to find something to do with her that's a little more refined. Like she's a difficult card to break. It's not like LeBlanc or Sivir, where it's just like,
you just slap it in and
Stats,
it's good.
we're gonna see if the stats are good right now.
Yeah.
That's another thing about LeBlanc. LeBlanc's stat line is super contextual. Like sometimes that card's going to be insane, and sometimes that card is like getting Mystic Shotted or Fleet Feather Trackered, or
I think that has a
Fiora with Barrier. Like,
yeah, I think that has a lot to do with how polarized the actual Hugh mentioned that the deck has really polarized matchups.
Yeah,
and that is mostly a reason to that is LeBlanc's really aggressive stat line, the 5/2. Like if you can deal with this 5/2 with quick attack, you're probably going to be on a good pace to win the game. And if you can't, you're probably going to get smoked. So that probably is a big reason why those games feel so polarized.
Reputation has been way easier than I kind of might assumed it might be to turn on. It does leave you kind of open. If you're going to efficiently turn on Reputation, you need cheap creatures with 5 power. Those creatures do not have a lot of toughness, so it leaves you open to Avalanche. It doesn't, like, 5 power Trival doesn't necessarily seem like something that would leave you particularly open to 2 mana sweepers, but in this context, it does.
Yeah.
I will say that a deck I've been meaning to try, I haven't had a really good chance to play it yet, but Ash LeBlanc looks awesome and kind of solves that issue with all the Yetis and stuff, and just a lot of tempo plays with having access to Brittle Steel and Frostbite is
so huge when your units are 5/2s.
Yeah. Suddenly they can block. In addition,
absolutely.
Yeah, because normally you can't.
Yeah.
So I also want to quickly touch on the fact that Shrima's out. We've been playing it for approaching a week at this point. Do you guys still think that TF Fizz is the best deck? I do, personally. At least right now, I definitely, nothing has blown me away so far that if I think that I was like, my only goal was to get to Master in a week, I would be playing TF Fizz still, I think.
That's reasonable. I do think I wouldn't want to do that because of the amount of Lysandre Trundle I've been seeing. And I think like Ice Shard and Avalanche and Blighted Ravine do a lot of work towards keeping that deck in check. And I think that deck is pretty specifically built to kind of try to stomp TF Fizz.
Sounds pretty reasonable.
So
I think if I had to pick a deck that was like quote unquote the best deck coming out of Shrima right now, it would be Lysandre Trundle. It's the one that I've seen the most of, other than LeBlanc Sivir. It's the one that's just like consistently been felt the strongest.
This deck is just good. Yeah.
Such a great example of just like a community member being like, hey, I'm 12-3 on this deck. And then I just saw it everywhere.
Yeah.
Like 4 hours later.
That's usually how these early meta things go. It's like one person builds a deck, does well with it, and it's just like boom,
and that can make it a meta deck because now everyone's like iterating around it, and the deck is shaping the meta, even though like it might even not be good. Like I don't think that that's true, but it's totally possible that this process could happen with a deck that is kind of fake good, like it hides the fact that it's bad well
with a high play rate.
Yeah, with a high play rate and just like. By like, for example, having polarized matchups. Like a deck can, over the long run, be proven to be pretty weak, but have had a good slew of matches, or just like people could be hitting the good side of variants.
Yeah, absolutely. All right, so I think that's. Do either of you guys have something you want to add to Shrima impressions here or anything in particular you're excited to see if it gets there in the future?
I have been wildly unimpressed by Kindred.
That's a pretty good first impression. I think I agree. I think that it was just been a little too slow, I guess. Is how I want to phrase it.
Her mark kind of doesn't do anything in my experience most of the time.
Yeah, the weakest enemy is like very real text, because like a lot of the time you just like kill a pool shark or whatever, like a random 1/1 or 2/1.
And it's not even like she marks it and then you can find a way to kill it, or she marks it and then it blocks the next thing in combat and it didn't even matter because you're killing her next turn, so she doesn't level. Like, she's so frequently done nothing in the games that she's been played against me.
I've never seen Kindred flip, which I actually think is very surprising, given that I thought it was going to be pretty easy to flip Kindred. Just like 2 turns, like, all right, kill your thing, flip. And like, that just hasn't happened for me. I've never seen it.
I do think people are perhaps not playing her in the right circuit, is the right decks.
That's probably correct. I mean,
I don't think that she's particularly good. She's like fine as a payoff for like the sack deck. I do think she's good in a deck like old Go Hard, which I've seen people playing her in and has seemed at least reasonable, because I think you want to be putting in a deck where you're like Go Harding their creatures, not where you're like Chronicler of Ruining your own.
Yeah.
Or Glimpsing your own.
I very much agree with that.
You probably also want Glimpse because that card's good in that deck, but
not the primary plan. Yeah, for sure.
Because then it's always killing a tiny unit. But if you're starting your value train with Go Hard or Withering Whale, it's getting rid of the little ones, and then she's marking the like 4/4 that you weren't killing otherwise, and then they have to deal with that.
Yeah, I think the power to Kindred is going to be like maneuvering the board position in such a way that you can end up killing the weak unit to trigger to kill the one that you actually need to kill. Yeah. Right. And that's kind of hard to do. And I haven't seen it done well yet. And I haven't seen Kindred be good because of that yet, I think. So I hope that Kindred finds a place, though. Like, it seems like Nasus has, and a lot of people thought that Kindred Nasus was just going to be like a duo made in, a pair made in the lab or whatever, and they're just going to be best buddies forever. But Nasus has seemed much better to me than Kindred.
I wouldn't say that.
I would.
That's fair. Nasus has been very. I've just never seen the card Nasus be good, because it just gets like hushed or.
Well, yeah, it's got. I'm not going to say it doesn't have problems. Yeah. It very much does, but at least it kills your opponent when they don't have anything.
I guess it beat me once by like, oh god, I attacked them with the Watcher.
Okay.
And they I maneuvered so that I wasn't dead to Atrocity. And then they blocked with their Nasus and Rite of Negation, not targeting anything, their own unit. And I was like, oh, that's a cute way to scoop. And then it like slayed the thing. And then like something else died in that combat or something. And it got big enough that he like ate it. And then that plus another buff spell got it to the point that he could Atrocity to my face through my Tough Nexus, and I was like,
"Wow, that's quite the game."
I could have beaten it had I just like
thought about what he was doing.
If I would have played Ice Shard, I would have killed the unit that he was killing with the Rite of Negation, but that didn't seem like something worth responding to me, because it was just like a Rite of Negation on nothing, and I just wasn't paying enough attention.
That sucks. Rite of Negation on nothing. Oh, that's a hard spell to try and counter.
I love that you can do that too, because it doesn't target anything, so you can just play the spell out.
Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah,
it's so weird that you can. Why can you do that? And it led to like a really weird bug too, where I saw some really funny Twitter posts of people like complaining, and then like 10 minutes later, when everybody had figured out this weird Rite of Negation bug, and people were abusing it, and then like the next like 10 minutes of clips were people messing it up, trying to abuse it.
Is that the one where you get the spell stuck on the stack?
No, there was like a weird blocking glitch with Rite of Negation too.
Interesting.
For like a quick moment, it got patched very fast. Obviously, because it was pretty not game breaking, but it was functioning as not intended very, very, very much. So
what did it do? What happened?
I'm not sure the exact details, but it was something along the lines of like when you were sacking a creature while blocking with like targeting nothing or something, it would like keep countering spells basically.
Oh God.
So because it just like stayed on the stack, and so like the spells would
God, that's
resolve,
super
but then
weird.
it would like, and then it would,
It would just
yeah.
eat the spells. Like,
yeah, and then
constantly.
there was like a way that you could set up the board such that it would it would just like lock your opponent out basically, and there were a lot of really funny clips of like people doing it and being like, this is ridiculous, and then the next guy is like, my opponent messed it up and died. He locked himself out. It's like vengeance. Yes, we got him. All right, so with all that behind us, let's look towards our main topic of the episode, which is how to improve as a player. And I think we all have a slightly different lens that we want to look at this question from. I know, Hughes talked a lot about trying to recognize tilt. I've talked a lot about analyzing your own plays. So do you guys have anywhere that you want to start here? This is such a huge question, obviously.
I know that you had a sort of level 1 and level
Yeah.
2 for this.
Yeah, I'd love to start there. So I think that when you're playing card games, I think that there's a lot of levels that you can play the game on, and levels that which you'll improve on. So I think that level 1 of playing any game really is just playing it, right? So like if you want to improve at a game, if you just play the game, eventually over time you're gonna get better at it, right? And this is not the fastest way to get better at any given game, right? But it will work. It's been time tested throughout as long as I've been alive. Like if you just do something enough, you're going to improve at it, even if you have your brain off the whole time, even if you play terribly, like just playing the games will improve you as a player over the long term. So like step 1 for me to improving as a player is make sure that you're playing enough games to actively improve, right? Because if your goal is to improve, there are ways that you can improve that aren't playing the game, but the most consistent way is to just play the game, So that's 1 for me. Number 2 for me is conscious decision making. So when you're playing the game and you're making active decisions, you're thinking through why you're doing things. And this is the state that most people play the game in, I think, is
playing around things.
Yeah, you're thinking about the game, you're making decisions for reasons, right? You're not just, here's my 4-drop, go. You thought about my 4-drop is better than my 2/2 drops, right? And then you chose to play your 4-drop instead, right? Like you're making active decisions for reasons. Whatever the reasons are, you're making decisions for reasons. And this is where we all exist in the game while we're playing it, right? And then I think that level 3 is analyzing your conscious decisions. And it's really interesting because in order to improve at the game, right, you play the game at level 2, but the thing that you really want to focus on in my head is level 3 is analyzing your conscious decisions, because the way that you improve your level 2 play is with level 3, right? Like you need to analyze your conscious decisions in order to make better conscious decisions while you're doing it. And in order to effectively analyze your conscious decisions, you have to learn how to do it effectively, right? So like there's a real like gradient here where it's like, all right, I want to play better in game. Well, in order to play better in game, you need to analyze how you were playing in game. And in order to do it better, you have to learn how to correctly analyze yourself in game, right? So there's a lot of levels there, I think, personally. And it's really hard.
Yeah,
right?
Absolutely.
It's really, really hard. But I think we're going to try to do our best to break it down.
Yeah. And I think I just want to say, I think it's really clear. These kind of bring up, I was reading a Reddit post where people were discussing like the differences between players in different kinds of ranks. And I think this is a very clear growth section where, like Alex said, level 1, I'm going to phrase it a little bit differently, but I think we pretty much mean the same thing. Level 1 is kind of just like playing the game at the very basic level, like casting the spells that you have mana from. Oh, they have more units than me, I'm in a Runation. Just kind of very basic, like I'm going to Mystic Shot their creature that has 2 toughness. And level 2 being okay, well, I know that this matchup's about LeBlanc, so I'm saving Mystic Shot for LeBlanc and not putting it on their Trifarian Assessor or Trifarian Glory Seeker right now. Stuff like that, right? Where you're planning ahead, you're trying to maneuver the game into spots for your Avalanche, you're trying to outplay your opponent, playing around cards, you're playing around your opponent's Avalanche and Ruination, so you're opening attacking even though it doesn't have, it's only 3 damage because that's how you want to be playing the game.
And this is the game, right?
Yeah.
Like
you're
that,
applying pressure, yeah.
That game that Noble's describing, that's the game, right? Yeah. Like that's the part that I think most competitive players enjoy. It's not And I mean, obviously everybody really likes the cool art, the music, it adds a lot. But like for me, the thing that I really like about this game and card games in general is that like how many layers are we going, like mental warfare. I know you want to do this, I want to do this, which level are we both on?
Absolutely.
Right?
Like a game of chess almost.
Yeah, it's really very similar.
And so what I was saying is that like when you're on level 2 and they're on level 1, you're going to win very often because you're just able to play around them. And then the interesting thing is when you're both on level 2, now you're trying to play around what they're playing around, analyze what they have in their hand based on what they're playing around, analyze why you're making the decisions you're making to allow you to change those based on
and that's where
things you know about your opponent, et cetera, et
yeah,
cetera.
and that's where level 3 comes in. And I know that, when we were talking about the seasonal tournament, we talked about how preparation was like the most important. Like you had to prepare yourself for any tournament because, and this is why, if you and your friend are both on level 2, but you've never done your equal skill level, let's say neither of you have really done any level 3 analyzation. You've never gone back, looked at your own play, talked with other people, tried to decide if the decisions you were making were correct and not just for reasons, right? Like when you're making decisions in game, you need to have a reason. That's step 1. Make sure you have a reason. Step 2 is making sure that reason was correct, right? And it's really hard. Nobody gets it right every time. I don't think anyone has ever played a perfect game of like, Magic or Legends of Runeterra. Like they almost certainly exist in theory, but in practicality, we're all humans. It's nearly impossible to play a perfect game of anything, right? So, and then if you go back and start analyzing, right, like these 2 players at level 2, equal skill, they're going to trade about 50% of their games. As soon as you start analyzing whether your decisions were correct or what play patterns came from this, you're on level 3, and that's how you gain the advantage. You're going to win, right? You're playing the same game at the time, but you need to analyze your conscious decision making in order to understand how your decisions affect the game, not just how decisions affect the game. It gets very specific as to what actual decisions you're making and are these right?
Yeah, and I want to, and part of that growth as a player, and some terminology that I want to bring in is your kind of eventual development of heuristics, which is basically kind of like, I think of heuristics as like buckets of decisions. They're kind of like if-when statements in your head.
They're your go-tos.
Yeah, they're kind of like your go-tos.
When I see Twisted Fate, cast Mystic Shot, stuff like this.
Yeah.
These are things that most players that have been playing through the last season probably have that heuristic now. If I see a Twisted Fate and I have a Mystic Shot in my hand, guess what's going to happen most of the time? My next action's probably going to be Mystic Shot your Twisted Fate.
Or after playing 10 games on Fiora Shen, realizing if I have 3 spell mana, I'm safe to play Fiora on turn 3, but if I don't, I shouldn't against blank deck or just kind of in general. And developing those kinds of pieces of knowledge is very important, and very level 2 in my mind. And level 3 is beginning to analyze why you have those and where you should break them. Because that is super important.
Absolutely.
Yeah, and I think another important thing to note is that each level kind of has a ceiling to it. Like you can only get so good by just playing the game and never thinking about it.
Absolutely.
There's just
if you never play around a card, you can only get so good.
Exactly, and if you're never thinking about your decisions, you can only get so good. Level 2, if you are thinking about your decisions, there's still a ceiling there because you're not thinking about whether what you're doing is good or not. You could be falling into a similar gameplay loop where you just keep making the wrong decision because maybe you're winning games because of that wrong decision.
And it's so hard because a lot of these decisions you make on like turn 1 or 2. Like, sometimes you make a decision on turn 3 that affects the outcome of the entire game. And at the end of the game, it's really hard to remember that and correctly associate that decision with why you lost this game. On turn 3, I chose, let's take this Mystic Shot, for example. On turn 3, I chose to Mystic Shot a Trifarian Glory Seeker or whatever, and then my opponent cast LeBlanc. Right? And then I lost to LeBlanc. And maybe on turn 6, you had a turn where you made a block and tried to get cute with a Troll Chant and you forgot about Decisive Maneuver or whatever, those decks are playing nowadays, right? And then you're like, oh, I forgot to play around Decisive Maneuver. My bad. That was my error. But no, a lot of the time that isn't the problem. And so it's so hard to actually... just after a game or even, in the game or whatever, it's so hard to level 3 analyze your own decisions. And I think that you should strive to try to do it in game if you can, but it's so hard.
Yeah, I think so a couple ways to help yourself do this is 1, play with people are playing at high level, just have them watch you from time to time, whether it be through coaching
or friends
or just friends. Like, and especially on ladder, it makes it a lot easier to not only talk through your plays, which helps a lot. When you say things out loud, you suddenly start to actually, when you verbalize what you're doing, you suddenly start to see your gameplay loops that are maybe problematic, and you can actually fix them easier.
Yeah.
And also, it helps you just not tilt, which is another huge part of this. Like, people tilt easier than they think they do. They're not as good at recognizing it as they think they are. I think this is true of everyone.
Yeah, and I actually think that tilt really fits really well into this gap between level 2 and level 3. Because I think that if you're tilted, there's almost no way that you can efficiently analyze your conscious decisions.
Yeah.
I think that if you're tilted, here's what you're going to say when you think about the last game. You know, like, I lost that last game because my opponent top decked that decisive maneuver. That was ridiculous, right? If you're tilted, you're going to say stuff like that. I can't believe they had it, right? There's no way you're going to be like, man, maybe on turn 3, I should have not Mystic Shot that Trifarian Glory Seeker and just let it trade with my Fizz or whatever. And the Fizz never, didn't really matter that game. I eventually just had to chump with it, and then I died to this LeBlanc. Like, if you're tilted, you're going to be like, God damn it, he drew the decisive maneuver. That was my promos. This sucks, right? You're never going to get to that level 3 point, And so recognizing that you are tilted is a huge part of trying to, break to that level 3 mental state.
Yeah, and something that is hard for people to think about or even acknowledge at all is there's a lot of time. Tilt's very subtle. It's very, very subtle. There's a lot of times where just you are tilted, like something you said, like things you say when you're tilted that maybe you don't realize it is.
we should make like a little tilt bingo card. It's like things people say
or,
when they don't think they're tilted.
Or
It's like a
cheat
graphic.
sheet.
The free space could be like, yeah.
Of course they
had it. Yeah.
Like, oh, they top decked lethal. Oh,
That deck's so broken.
Have you ever said to yourself, I can't believe there's no way they have the 3rd Mystic Shot? Have you ever decided that math is for blockers?
Yeah.
You might be tilted.
Yeah. That's really good.
Yeah. Another common one I've found is you queue up into a game and you see your champions and you see their champions and you're like, damn it, I lose.
Crap. This matchup sucks.
That's it. And then, like, from that moment, that's tilt. Like, you might not think it is, but the moment you say to yourself, oh God, how do I win? That's like the start of tilting. Like,
they have Twisted Fate in their deck and I do not. What have I done?
Exactly. Or even just like you see a champion that you hate, like, oh God, I hate playing against that champion. Exactly. Like, then you're starting to tilt, like, right there. Like, it's just immediate. Like, you don't even.
And then you forget to discard your card and play your Poro Cannon to block the Teemo, and then you take some shrooms that you don't need to, and it's all over.
I'm sure that's never happened to anyone in particular.
No one can relate to that, I'm sure.
Yeah. And a lot of people associate tilt with, like, really over the top emotions. And that's
Rage.
it's like really over dramatized in most media, I think, tilt. And it leads people to think that they're tilt proof, and nobody is. There are people who are very good at not getting tilted. And to be honest, like, I think our friend group generally, it has a lot of those people. Like, our friend group generally is pretty resilient to tilt. We have a lot of, like, long-time seasoned card game players in our group. And this type of stuff eventually, for a lot of people, sort of starts to numb your senses a little bit. And so people think that, tilt's like, people raging, throw their keyboard against the wall.
That guy in the
mad.
game store who, like, threw their deck across the room. And that guy was obviously tilted. But that guy that spent the next 20 minutes after his match talking his friend's ear off about how lucky his opponent got was also tilted.
Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah. And tilted in a more harmful, worse way because.
Well, the one of these people was being, like, basically flipping, literally flipping over a table.
When I say harmful, I mean harmful to their growth and longevity as a competitive player. Because when you say my opponent got lucky, immediately you are not only absolving yourself of all blame for losing the game, which will not allow you to improve, you're attributing a loss to things that are out of your control. And those are two huge parts of improving as a player. You can't remember that when you lose to a certain thing, like just because you did something in a game that ended up losing you that game, that doesn't mean you shouldn't have done it.
Yeah.
And it sucks
Absolutely.
because like it's really hard to just absolve yourself from guilt for the game because it especially in games where these variances do exist. Sometimes you do play great and your opponent got lucky and you lost because of it. And that's not to say that you couldn't have played better, but some games just are unwinnable, right? Like it is just the fact of card games. But it is not nearly the amount that people complain that you hear your friend complain about that game they got unlucky and lost, right? Like, it might be 1 or probably less % of Legends of Runeterra games are technically unwinnable from the start, right? Like these are the games where you're playing Go Hard and you mulligan a medium hand and draw 2 Commander Ledros, 2 Commander Ledros, brick against discard aggro. Okay, of course I'm gonna lose. Like there's nothing I can really do here. I don't have castable cards in my hand. You just die before you play a spell. Those games are unwinnable. Those suck. Those are unlucky. Those are not the games like those are the unwinnable games, not the ones where your opponent top decked the Ruination on turn 19 to survive and then top decked Feel the Rush on turn 20 to kill you. Like I'm almost sure that you could have taken a different line to have a better chance to win those type of games. Almost always.
Absolutely. And that's something that I want to point out is that people tilt and want to shift this blame because it's easy, because it sucks
to admit that you were wrong and that you messed up, right? Like, and a lot of people just can't do it. I guess it sucks because people want to be as good as, and this has a lot to do with the imposter syndrome thing we've talked about in the past, where like people don't think they're as good as their peers. People think that their peers don't lose, or that their peers don't make mistakes, or that their peers don't get tilted and punt a game, right? So then they don't want to admit that they did, right? Because they're like, oh, well, they've never done that. And of course everyone has, right? Like
bar none, the best like level up in my Magic game was like really realizing that was just the improvement in my mental of just like having a kind of this is a very corporate word, but like a growth-based mindset, like thinking about games in terms of like what I can improve on and how I can grow rather than like getting mad about losses. And like another thing that is important, and the other side of this, is sometimes you need to stop beating yourself up over a loss. After it happens, you need to learn from it instead of getting mad at yourself about it.
You do need to take blame for making mistakes, but you don't need to make yourself like attack yourself for that.
You don't need to call yourself trash. You don't need to like talk down to yourself and make yourself feel worthless about being bad at a card game, because first of all, it doesn't matter.
And the absolute we're making an entire episode right now about how the absolute best thing you can do to improve is to call yourself out on your mistakes. I respect players who admit when they made mistakes. They don't try to cover them up, right? Like if they make a play and then I come to them after the game and I'm like, hey, why did you cast Avalanche on turn 3 here instead of waiting and just passing, and then they might develop more? And then they go, well, I just didn't want to get opened for 4, but then they cast a LeBlanc and I couldn't really deal with it, and it was probably wrong, and I'm gonna it was probably wrong, you're right. Like those conversations, I just like immediately respect the players a lot, because they don't it's not like, oh, I mean, like I killed some stuff, or like, yeah, they had a bunch of stuff, I cast it, or like, oh, or after that game, it's like, oh, maybe I should have, but can you believe that draw? It's like, okay, well, I think you're missing the point, or like the big takeaways that you can glean from this game. There's a lot of knowledge to be had every single game.
Yeah, absolutely.
Fight for it.
Yeah, something that people have trouble dealing with is the idea that everyone wants like a silver bullet. Everyone wants like the get rich quick equivalent.
Yeah,
of
the thing that they need to know to get better.
Exactly. Like, what's this one piece of advice? It's like, it's not how that works. Improvement at card game, improvement at anything is hard work always. You have to be willing to work hard to be better at the thing you want to be better at. Doesn't matter what it is.
Absolutely.
And it's equally as true for this game. It's very difficult to become better at this game. And the better you get,
the harder it gets.
Exactly. The harder it is to improve, because there's just less and less, well, maybe not less and less you can do, but more and more abstract things you need to do.
And also the
to
knowledge
improve.
just builds every time you learn something new, right? Like that's another thing that you need to remember and apply. You know, how many games of Legends of Runeterra have we all played?
Oh God, I don't know.
Thousands. I mean, I'm sure we're all above it.
Oh, yeah.
A couple thousand at least, right? Like, and then if you learn one thing every game you played, let's say, and that's probably generous. I don't think most people learn one thing. Like, I don't think that
absolutely.
most people have one takeaway from every game they've played. I'm certain that we don't.
And even if you do, you're not going to remember every single
Exactly.
takeaway.
You know, I could not remember the 2,000 bullet points from the 2,000 games of Legends of Runeterra I played, for example, and that's obviously just a complete spitball. But like, you know, am I really going to remember 2 years from now after I played another 10,000 games of Legends of Runeterra that I should have avalanched, or I should have waited for them to cast LeBlanc and before I avalanched? Probably not. Which means that you have to train it to become muscle memory.
Yeah,
you can't just learn it. You have to. You basically have to train it and turn it into a heuristic.
And the process of learning it is the thing that is hard and the thing that you're practicing. Like you're practicing the ability to learn from your mistakes. And then it's going to be a new format. It's going to be a new game. New cards are going to be out. But the thing that's valuable is knowing how to learn from your mistakes, avoid, falling into the pitfall of a results-based thinking and being like, oh, because that won me the game, it was good. Or, I couldn't have won that game because they top decked the card, so it doesn't matter anyway. Getting out of that, getting into a mindset where you're looking for opportunities to learn and grow is huge. And not to be corny, but that's pretty big. That's pretty important in life too. Like learning how to lose and learning from your mistakes. It turns out it's a pretty valuable life skill. So,
true.
we're not talking about things here that don't matter. Like they also matter in your life. Like this is a card game that you should try to enjoy.
Absolutely.
But also like you can get better at making decisions in your life. You can get better at like thinking through like what you're doing and not getting upset about variance, and also taking responsibility for the mistakes that you make in the game or in your life.
Yeah. And to bring it real quick back to card games, you mentioned that like we're training you how to improve a card game is training your ability to learn quickly.
Absolutely.
And that's why I think you see, in most card games, there are seasoned professionals that have been around for tens of years. They've not been playing with the same cards at all. When you look at, people in the Magic the Gathering Hall of Fame, or and our game, Legends of Runeterra, is a little bit too new for us to have real faces. So I think that Magic probably is a better anecdote, at least currently. But Hearthstone, Gwent, whatever your game of choice is, right? Like these players have been playing this game. They've been the best in the world for 10 or 15 years with different cards every time. It's not like this deck is just their deck. And there are people like that who are the best Storm player in the world, the best Go Hard player in the world or whatever. And sometimes it just didn't transfer, right? And that's because those people clicked with the cards, the style, the deck. But the players who are long lasting, really are around communities and stay at the top for a long time are the people who have mastered what we're talking about right now. The people who have mastered how to improve quickly, who have mastered learning from their own mistakes, right? Those players are the ones that are going to have 10-year careers, not the people who just happened to randomly build the best deck and then spike to rank 1 with it while they were, clowning people with this brew.
Yeah.
Right.
And yeah, another thing that I wanted to say is that this is also huge. Oh my God, I just totally trailed off. Give me a second.
Yeah, whatever.
Yeah, okay.
So, and I don't know, I've heard the phrase that it takes 10,000 hours to be a master at anything. Mm-hmm. And that's true here too, right? Like, Hugh said it, there's no shortcut to immediate improvement. There's a golden road to follow where like, as long as you're on this path, you're improving at the fastest rate you possibly can, but it's not easy. It is going to take 10,000 hours to become a master at anything, literally anything. Card games are no different. So,
and the thing that I wanted to say is that another huge part of this is like, as soon as I wrote my first Magic tournament report, huge level up in my game, because, you have to think back over the whole tournament, winning, losing. You often write them when you win tournaments. So, you get to talk about running good, but also it gives you a chance to analyze some mistakes that you made. And so that process of like taking some notes during the tournament to know what I was going to write about and then writing about it is a huge part of the process. So because it forced me to sit down, analyze my games, remembered everything that happened, remember what I learned in those moments, 12, 24 hours after, and then having to articulate that, huge.
For example, when I play poker, so this is a card game. It's quite a bit different from Legends of Runeterra, but I bring a little journal when I play, and I write down the interesting hands that happen. And I've started doing this recently, and that's because I'm pretty good at remembering games of Legends of Runeterra, and there's much more information to write down in a game of Legends of Runeterra, so it doesn't seem nearly as feasible to me. But in poker, there's only 5 cards and your hand, so like it's pretty simple to write everything down, and then you take the play immediately after the hand, write it down, and then at the end of the day, I flip through my like 5 or 6 notable hands that I wrote down, and I ask my friends, I'm like, hey guys, what would you have done here? Like, do you think this was good? Right? Like, and that helps me a lot. Like, where I like write it down, and then, after I'm just sitting there folded a hand or whatever, I can just look at it and think about it. Like, think about it for 10 minutes, right? You can't think about any decision for 10 minutes in a game normally, right? Like, you're going to run out of time or whatever, or there's people waiting on you, but you can absolutely sit there and think about it after. And next time it happens, you're going to be better for it.
Yeah, so, just asking people and respect and are good, or just like, hey, always asking, how do I improve? Even if it's just rhetorical to no one in particular. If you're just asking yourself, just keep saying that to yourself, and you'll eventually find ways to help yourself improve. Like, you just need to have that mindset always and be willing to just grow as a player, because a lot of people think they're willing, and you can see by their behavior, they're clearly not. They're just not ready to really apply themselves in a way that lets them improve at a game, because they're just sitting there being angry at something, or they're sitting there like unwilling to learn from their mistakes. They're just not willing to take responsibility for their mistakes and attribute all of their losses to things that their opponents did, their luck, things that are out of their control. Like, there's a finite number of things you can control as a player in this game, and you have to focus on those things and what you have to do differently, rather than relying on your opponent to not draw cards. Like, that's ridiculous. Like, how are you gonna
control that?
Yeah, you
exactly.
can't. You literally can't. Like, you can't. Well, I need to win this game because they need to be unlucky. Like, that's ridiculous.
It's my promo game. I gotta win. Just one time.
I deserve it.
Could they just lose? Yeah, and I think that, I don't know, the part that drives a lot of people off is because, like, I don't think that level 3 mentality, analyzing your own conscious decisions, is really all that fun. It feels more like studying for me. Like, a lot of the time when I'm going back and reviewing things, whether it be, VODs or videos or whatever, previous games I've played, hands that I write down in poker, stuff like that, right? Like, I'm studying it, right? Like, I'm not playing the game, I'm thinking about the game, and I like thinking about the game, right? And so, but it's a lot more of like a process where I'm like sitting down, analyzing, studying, thinking. And studying is kind of boring, right? Like, so a lot of the time, if you're, you like record your video, go back and watch it. Like, I've heard that a million times for every game. Like, have you tried record yourself playing, record a VOD or whatever, and then go back and watch it later? And people just don't like doing it, because it's hard to, like, it's just not that
Takes
fun.
a lot of time.
Right?
Yeah.
You have to set it up, right? And it's not that fun to do the time you do it, really. Like, but like, I swear it's really, really good to do.
Yeah. And so it's kind of ironic. Studying's a good way to put it in some sense, but I'm someone who, this is going to sound weird, but I hate studying, but I love learning things. Like
me too. Yeah, absolutely. Couldn't agree more.
And those are kind of
different. Yeah.
They're a little different, but they're mostly the same, right? Like, it's just a way to think about learning. Like, I don't know.
It's like, I love money, but I hate going to work.
Exactly. And
is really the feeling there.
Yeah. You really want the payoff, but you don't want to do the work to get to the payoff. But if you're willing to allow yourself to have fun with the process, like, there's ways.
Do it with friends.
Yeah.
Studying with friends is so much fun. We keep bringing up the friends thing, but seriously, like, if you just pick a Legends of Runeterra buddy and you're like, hey, you and me, we're going to be great and you grind it out, those success stories happen in every game. Why? Because you have somebody motivating you, right?
Yeah.
Like you and your friend both commit to doing this, right?
Like
you
last-
both commit that you're going to study an hour a day. You both commit you're going to play 2 hours a day, and you do it all with someone or whatever.
Both start streaming.
You both
get in
start
Discord a
streaming,
lot,
right? Like you're both going to have ideas to bounce off each other. This doesn't mean that you aren't going to fall into pits, traps, or some potential holes or whatever. You will, but like having someone to work through it with, or having someone to make the studying or the learning fun, adds so much.
Like last night we had two of our friends. One of them went 34-8 on ladder yesterday. Got from silver
absolute
to plat.
banger.
Yeah, with Fiora Shen.
Fiora
Deck is
Shen,
really well
it
positioned
was,
right now. We'll talk about
very
that
well
later.
positioned. Punishes misplays so well. And I can't play the game that long. I can't do it. But I played I joined them for a little bit. I joined them for like 2.5 hours, and that's much longer than I normally go without before I take a break. Like, and it's just because sitting there with them, hanging out, just talking about things. I wasn't even watching their game. I was playing my own game. And
I do that all the time.
Yeah, and one person was swapping between our games, watching each of us, and just chiming in every now and then. It's just more fun.
Yeah, it was all streamed too, which is cool.
Yeah,
So,
yeah, absolutely.
Check that out.
It's way
Join
more
our
fun.
Discord. You'll know when those are happening.
Yeah, I love this topic. I must say, I really, really love trying to talk about how to analyze yourself. And now that we've established, like, I think that you want to be analyzing yourself, I want to talk a little bit about how you are supposed to analyze yourself. We're talking about trying to get to this level 3 mind state where you're analyzing your conscious decisions. And I know that or at least me personally, I try to spend a lot of my mental energy there when I'm thinking about these games. So for me, here are the things that have worked the best. Number one is, without a doubt, talking to other people about the game. You're going to have conversations on another level that you're going to have conversations on a level that you don't have with yourself. When someone asks you, why did you do this? And you give a reason, and then they say, okay, but that doesn't make sense because of this. And then you have to stop and think and come up with a reason why, or acknowledge that they're right. Like that happens almost every time you talk with somebody about the game. That's number one. Play with friends. Number two, I think is record your own videos. Like if you don't have people that you trust or aren't readily available, or your friends don't play Legends of Runeterra, whatever it is, watch your own VODs. Yeah. That is absolutely the best way that you yourself can spend time alone to improve. You aren't going to be able to remember every game or every action that you took. You aren't going to remember every game that you played. So make sure that you record the ones and then pick interesting ones. You don't have to do this a lot. If you do this once a week, you're going to have a huge advantage on the rest of the population because they will never do it.
Yeah, absolutely. It can be the one interesting game. Like, yeah,
absolutely.
You got a really neat game. Yeah, and VOD it. Send it to us. I'll write an article about it. That
sure.
sounds fun.
Yeah.
And that kind of stuff, just that conscious thought process, is a lot of the reason that some of the best players are content producers is because they're streaming where they're talking through all of the decisions they make, and that's helping them learn and grow.
And it's fascinating to the watchers
absolutely,
as well, right? Because you get to kind of like bear witness to one of the greatest minds in the field who has put in all of this work, and you see the personalities. And like I said, nobody got to where they are without putting in the work, right? None of the best players in any game were just that innately
sat
good.
down and just like knew what to do in Legends of Runeterra. Like that's just not how it works.
Yeah, absolutely not. Yeah, and we all came from card games, and we were pretty familiar with card games. And so when you sat down and played Legends of Runeterra, it was really easy to be a level 1 player. It was pretty easy to be a level 2 player. It's really hard to be a level 3 player in every game because you have to understand it so well that you can analyze whether or not your decisions were right or wrong. And you have to do it while you aren't tilted, right? Basically, that's the third step is don't try and analyze your plays while you aren't tilted. That's my third piece of advice. It doesn't work. You're going to end up with you're probably going to end up doing more harm than good because you're going to end up with bad takeaways instead of good takeaways. And it's hard to know when you're tilted.
Yeah, you're going to fall into, if you do that, you're just going to fall into very negative gameplay loops where you just like you form a bad habit and then you repeat that bad habit. That bad habit will make you lose games. You'll tilt more. You'll continue this bad behavior. Like, the hardest part of this whole thing, once again, is recognizing when you are tilted. Like, it's over and over. We'll keep saying it. Like, it's
hard. It's so hard.
So difficult.
Yeah, absolutely. All right. I think we've covered this one pretty well. Do you guys want to add anything else before we move on to our listener questions?
Yeah, lastly, like I just wanted to sum up that the way to know that you're tilted is when you're making decisions that aren't rational, when you're making decisions based on how you feel things should go, like you feel like they can't possibly have. This is a good example, so I'm going to keep using it.
I can't be this unlucky.
Yeah, they can't possibly have the third mystic shot. It's like if I make Fiorshan have it the fourth time in a row, I'm sure they won't. I did this in a game the other day, and they were top decking the whole time, but they did have it 5 times in a row off the top. But I didn't get unlucky. I drew 5 things that made them have it in a row off the top. Maybe I should have like sandbagged one of them. Maybe I could have played better. Whatever.
And to be clear, they can't have it here. It's a very different mindset from they've already drawn 2 of them. There's only 1 in their deck. Most like they're unlikely to have it here, so this is my best play. And very different line. Very different
make the play, and then they have it, and it's important not to get tilted about that.
Yeah, those 2 lines of thinking are going to lead to the exact same play, and one of those 2 players is markedly better than the other one.
Absolutely.
And that's or one of those 2 players is tilted or whatever. But like in this example where one of these players is analyzing the game, trying to learn, and then they had it, unlucky next game, versus the player who's like they can't have it and jams, and then they're like they have it, and then they just like snap, surrender, and close the game, right? Like
absolutely.
There's a very big difference there between why you're making your decisions.
Yeah.
Anything to add, Hugh?
Not really. No, I think we've mostly hit all the big notes.
Alrighty, well then let's get into our listener questions for the week, starting with our question of the week. This one comes from Dustin in the Discord. They ask, do you see the emergence of multiple OTK style decks as an issue? This stands for one turn kill, featuring Lee Sin, concurrent timelines, Watcher combo, and even Burblefish at times. You guys think there's a problem with the amount of times you're just dying in one turn in this game? This is a hard question.
It is a hard question.
My knee-jerk reaction to this question was no.
Same.
Because I haven't felt like I actually do die that many times in one turn. But it is kind of a worrying trend, right? Like, people don't like dying in one turn. Like, period. So, like, it is a little worrisome, but it doesn't really feel like it's that omnipresent yet.
So this is partially like a weird like design issue, like a game design issue. Like this is just like something that OTKs always feel bad. Like it is, and you want to, and it doesn't matter what game you're playing, as someone who is making a game, you want to avoid at all costs making your players feel bad for playing the game. And
that does not go well.
That is not
a good player experience you want.
Exactly. It turns out people play your game less if they feel bad when they're playing it.
Wow.
Yeah.
Game design 101. Yeah.
Yeah. And I think that it's okay for it's okay for any OTK deck to exist as long as the route to that one turn kill took a lot of work to achieve.
Yeah, so I think this is such a huge thing that this is like a great example of when people get of tilt. It's like you didn't lose to the Feel the Rush turn. You did not lose to the Feel the Rush. You did not lose to that person casting a 12 mana slow spell that put 20 into power into play. Like you lost when you failed to kill them because Withering Wail plus Avalanche killed like 5 of your creatures and left them at 20. Like, it doesn't matter what the 12 mana of spells that they were going to play then. Yes, sure, Feel the Rush is better at closing the game than like 12 like many other 12 mana combinations, but if it was a Commander Ledros or whatever, like you would still probably be dead. Like, Feel the Rush isn't the problem. You should be happy that it killed you quick enough that you can go to the next game. Because, or you could also sit there against actually 17 Anivias, like, and lose very, very slowly. Like, Anivia does not OTK you, the game is just as over.
Yeah.
When they harrowing you or when they
feels
put the
more
third
over.
Anivia into play. Yeah. It's just as over. And, it feels bad to get OTK'd, but decks like the Lee Sin deck that was playing Lee Sin when he was 4 mana were doing that too fast. You did lose to the Lee Sin and not get a full chance to play the game on like turn 5 when he just like murdered you. Like that one, totally valid complaint. That's why they raised him up to 5 mana. And now he kills you like
On turn
six,
7
turn
or
7.
8.
But that's like if you're lucky too. Like
Yeah,
before it was on turn 4, 5 if they're lucky. Now it's on turn like 7, 6 or 7. So.
Yeah, and another thing is that people, I think, I love the example here of the Watcher in particular. People are really,
Such a good
really upset when they lose to the Watcher. And two things I want to make very clear.
You could hear the anger in his voice with this one. He's really holding back a scream here.
I'd like to make it clear that you lost the game
When they put the second Commander Ledros in play.
when they played 4 creatures, summoned 4 creatures that cost 8 or more mana, and then after that played a creature that could die to vengeance or ruination or get stunned or
If they knew you had...
that you know they have for multiple turns before this, and they did this all when they had the attack token and they're still alive. On top of all of this...
Game sucks, I lost.
Yeah. On top of all of this, you then allowed that creature to attack, obliterate your deck, and then
Have the audacity to go on Reddit and complain.
and still not realize that all you had to do, and this is a little bit difficult, I will admit, but all you had to do was keep a champ spell in your hand. That's it. Like, I beat the Watcher last night because all I did with Fiora Shen was I sat there and I was
Fiora's
like,
riposte.
I was winning the game and I was like, there's no way I lose this game. And all of a sudden he like levels Lysandra. I'm like, oh wait, this is scary. Like he can actually like in a couple turns he can play the Watcher. And then a couple turns later, he did play the Watcher and I was like, uh-oh, this is pretty bad. But I have Shen's champ spell in hand. So he attacked with the Watcher. I chump blocked it. It doesn't have trample. I lived. And then I played
Overwhelm, yeah.
Sorry, Overwhelm.
It's okay.
Yeah.
We're gonna have to get a trample jar. Clink. Put a coin in
the most.
Put a coin in the Overwhelm jar.
Yeah, exactly. Anyway, and then I just played Stand United. I think that's what it's called.
Yeah, it's called Stand United.
And I
Shen
shuffled
Stand
a Shen
United,
into my
baby.
deck, and I beat him. Like, it's just,
Yeah, you're just like, yeah.
I had like 6. I'm way more than 6. Like you see Lysandra in the opening of the game, you're like, I know what I should be playing around. Like you know that part of their plan is to play the Watcher and attack with it. You need to have, on some level, you need to recognize that this is a way you can lose the game.
And also, it's okay if on turn 12 or 13 the ramp deck beats you. That's fine.
yeah,
Also
exactly.
okay with that. Sorry, man.
Remember that sometimes it is going to beat you. Sometimes you can't play in such a way that allows you to leave a chance spell in your hand. Like that just doesn't happen.
And
sometimes.
then you can complain on Reddit.
But not then. You got to earn your complaints. That's what we're telling
Then
you.
and only
you gotta earn
then
it.
are you allowed to complain
You
on
got to
Reddit.
play well, then you can complain.
Yeah, and like concurrent
That's fair.
timelines, I have not seen that deck very often, but like they need to draw concurrent timelines. They need to get to the point where they can play their Ledros.
Well, let's talk about this. Okay, this does make me mad. They need to play concurrent timelines. It's not a hard spell to resolve, but they do need to draw it. Then they need to get to 9 mana with no ramp spells. Resolve it. Then they win 60% of the time if you don't have a removal spell for the Dreadway. It's only 60% of the time.
Yeah,
it's like Splinter Twin, but 9 mana and only works 60% of the time.
And it deals with the Commander Ledros too, if you have the removal spell, because it transformed into the Dreadway. So it's not like you're getting your Commander Ledros back. There's no rebate here. Like your Commander Ledros is gone now.
I will say that killing a Dreadway is not
always an easy task.
easy.
But Entomb, Freljord does it now too.
You can entomb
nice.
it. Yeah,
That's nice.
I have seen
Little Ione
many
can
a
bounce it.
Dreadway.
You can also counter the
Deny and Right of Negation both stop this.
Yeah.
Like it's
There's a lot of things that people can do to deal with it.
Like
absolutely.
when you die to something, try and think about how much time you had to think about whether you would die to it. Like, is it something that like came out of nowhere? Because like sometimes Burblefish, like Dustin mentioned Burblefish in the question.
Yeah.
That does sometimes feel a
Like
little unfair. Like they sometimes go, you like avalanche them.
Yeah, that was
you
the
kill their
exact
3
example I was going to
creatures.
use.
Yeah.
This
And
happened to
then
me
they-
last night.
Yeah, and then they go Burblefish, iterative improvement, iterative improvement, iterative improvement, burble, burble, burble. kill you, and you're like, what was that?
Excuse me?
Guess I'm dead.
Like, can you not? And that feels a little bit bad, but you want, like, even in that scenario, you have to, like, why were they tanking those cards in their hand for that amount of time? Like, there are always things you should be thinking about. Sometimes it sucks, but a lot of the times there was more play than you think there was.
Yeah. And, that deck in particular is very good and might even get nerfed. And,
Yeah.
We will see.
Alrighty, moving on now. The next question is from the Rabbit Returns. They ask, which deck do you think will be changed the least and still viable in the new expansion?
My go-to answer is Pirates, because my God, that list hasn't changed by a single
Since
card
beta.
since pretty much
Well, MF, when MF came, since Bilgewater.
since it's basically its inception. Like
Yeah.
it like was created, then it got tuned in like a few weeks, and it has not changed.
people learned that Jack the Winner was good, and then we put that card in the deck, and then
And that was
That was the
and then
last
it got
one.
nerfed, and then
and then it stayed because the card's still nuts.
yeah, absolutely.
I mean, my answer is TF that deck is just so solid, and I think it's probably, like I talked about it a little bit earlier, I think it's probably still the best deck.
Yeah, I mean, for the sake of variety, I'll throw in Fiora Shen. Like, it gets some minor improvements, but it doesn't need Golden Aegis to be good. Like, it is better than Relentless Pursuit, but like, that's not why the deck's still good.
Yeah, absolutely. It was plenty good before then.
Yeah.
All right. Next up from Wooloo, they ask, what are good things to watch for when reviewing your own gameplay? I love this question. I've done a reasonable amount of self-review. The thing that I usually look for is what patterns am I falling into and why. So, for example, one realization I had when I was playing Lisa and Zoe in the last season, right when the deck was newish, I picked it up off Twitter, was playing some Lisa and Zoe, doing really well, and then I watched a couple games I played, and I noticed that I just played Sparklefly on turn 2 like every game against aggro. And that makes quite a bit of sense on the surface, right? But like there were multiple times where I could have played Mountain Goat instead, and it would have been better for sure. The games where you didn't have like Mentor of Stones in your hand already, or where you didn't have a lot of pump spells, right? Like, and I just needed something to block better, right? Like I was never blocking with Sparklefly. It's a 2-mana 1/2 that's, basically gaining me a life every turn. It's not blocking unless it has to, for the most part, right? Whereas with Mountain Goat, if I would have played it, I would have traded with their
3/2 or
3/2 or a Legion Saboteur, whatever it is, right? And that would have gained me, 3 life on the spot, basically, plus the gem, which is way more than the Sparklefly attack would have done. Stuff like that. I realized where I was just like, kind of autopilot playing the Sparklefly. And then, when I went back and played more games with the deck, I started really thinking about what I was going to do on turn 2. Should I be banking my spell mana? And then I started, thinking about that. And then when I went back and reviewed, I realized I was playing creatures too much on turn 2, and I should have been banking spell mana more. And then on turn 4, if I'd banked more spell mana, I would have been able to win this interaction. Things like that. Like on turn 2, did I decide not to bank spell mana? And then on turn 5, I lost this counter war because I didn't have enough mana for it. There are trends you can notice for sure. And I would say those are the best things to try and analyze, is the trends and your mulligan decisions. Mulligan decisions are very critical and easy to analyze, I think.
And so hard.
And so hard. And you can learn so much. You can really think a lot about the matchup if you, especially with the lens of hindsight, looking at your mulligan decisions matters a lot. If you really only focus on mulliganing and what cards you want in the matchup, your win rate's going to skyrocket. And I think that's the easiest thing to think about when reviewing VODs. So I would start with mulligan decisions and then look for patterns.
Yeah, absolutely. I also want to it's a great opportunity to see which decisions you defaulted on. Like, there's always a decision. Even if you have 4 mana and only one spell that costs 4 mana, you can still decide not to play it.
Yeah.
Like, if you're like, oh, there weren't any decisions in the first 2 turns. No, there were decisions. Like, you could have chosen whether or not you wanted to play Zoe on turn 1 without the attack token or waited till turn 2. Like, that is a decision that you can make. Sometimes it's the right one. So it's important to weigh the pros of cons in that. And Legends of Runeterra especially, way more than a game like Magic. You can just not play your 1 mana spell on turn 1, not play your 2 mana spell on turn 2, 3 on 3, because you're banking spell mana, because you can be bluffing, passing, because you want to you know, you don't want to play your Zoe out if they're going to have a challenger, you know, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera.
There's a lot. There's a lot of
so
reasons.
many. Yeah.
And I will add, you'll be surprised at how often you'll remember your reasoning for making plays when you're reviewing. At least I am. I felt like when I started that I would, I'd go back and review this game and I would probably not remember it very much at all. But like by the second or third turn, I was like, why didn't I do that? Oh yeah, I was trying to play around. Like I decided that it was pretty likely my opponent had Avalanche because they played, this Avarosan Sentry on turn 2 and then didn't play a Weirding and then banked Spellman on turn 3. Whatever it was. Like you can think it's pretty easy to actually recall your own thought process as long as you're actively thinking about it both in game and when you're reviewing. I've found at least.
Yeah, I have a very kind of weird specific thing that I don't know if anyone else does this. I'm sure they do, but I have a very bad habit of not wanting to play a spell that heals me if it doesn't heal me.
Oh, I hate not getting full value. Just full stop. I will not cast it. Absolutely not.
Yeah.
Never. Yeah. You will catch me dead before I lose any amount of value printed on my card.
Yeah. Like great examples. I think my most common one is when I'm at 20, I don't feel like playing that Kindly Tavern Keeper.
I know.
I will never cast it.
Yeah.
Never.
And it's like,
I hate it.
Fun fact, sometimes it's just good to hit your opponent for 3. Sometimes
it's so right to just cast it so
picture
often.
This. Your
I hate
opponent
it.
has a 3/3. It's your priority, but they have the attack token. You don't want to play your Kindly Tavern Keeper because you're at 20. So you take 3 and then play your Kindly Tavern Keeper. What if you just traded, man?
Value.
What if you just traded?
He doesn't get it.
Also-
Don't listen to him. That's a change. He doesn't get it.
Vile Feast, not like it's okay to let your Vile Feast.
Okay,
They're
that one.
attacking you with a 2/1.
That one. I've never thought to myself.
You
I'm
went on
not
the stack.
getting
You're
one.
like, if I let it hit me, I gain life.
Value. Ding 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 ding.
I've literally done that.
All right.
Yeah, so for example, it's really easy to notice stuff like that when you review your play.
Exactly.
It's like, did I really just take 2 to gain 1 so that it didn't feel as bad? Yes. Yes.
And I still do it is the worst part.
Yeah, it's hard not to.
It's really hard not to.
When it, like, oh,
we
God.
talk a lot about how to improve, but we're not perfect at it. We'd be a lot better than we were.
No, of course not. No one is. Yeah, and like we've talked a lot about how to improve, and really, we're just like trying to impart what we've figured out, but like we're not experts. So,
Yeah.
All right. Next one is from Trap God 666. They say, at Hugh, thoughts on Thralls and Inquisitor being a trap in deck building.
I think this is a reference to how I thought part of Lysandra being good was like the inevitability of her thralls existing. And I will stand by that there are games that you will win just because of that secondary text on Lysandra. But after playing with both thrall, I've not once put the card Frozen Thrall in my deck, I will say. I've definitely never thought that was good.
The 1 mana landmark?
The 1 mana, just like the
Yeah,
landmark.
it's called Frozen.
I thought that would be something that I would be able to say, but little did I know, like we queued up on stream and like the first deck someone shipped us was this deck with 3 copies of Frozen Thrall in it. And I'm just sitting
it was
like,
Lysandra Swain. It was
yeah,
pretty good.
It was pretty good. I was just like, oh man, I thought I would never play this card.
Yeah, and I will say that Drakthorn Inquisitor has been wildly underperforming, and I do kind of think that card's also a trap. It's been played to some effect against me before, but
It has. It has really good games, obviously, but I agree. It has been in general not that good.
yeah, and I think the best part of Lysandra is just her being a 3 mana 2/3 with tough that eventually will win you the game.
Yeah, I mean, I played a Drakthorn Inquisitor, and my opponent chomped it with a spider and then cast Mystic Shot, Unspeakable Horror on it, and I was like, deal. Nice.
Yikes.
Okay, well
that's Magical Christmas Land.
yeah, exactly. We
That
can't.
is the best I've ever seen that card be, and it was still a 1-for-1 with a Mystic Shot.
All right. Trap God also asks, is concurrent timelines a bait? And should it be considered as a one-of in PNCSI decks?
Ooh,
One of is interesting.
I cannot.
I can't imagine that card is a one-of. I think that card is a build around. It's got to be a 3-of or a 0-of. Like, I don't know. If you're just putting a 1-of in your deck, then you're just like saying that you just kind of want to upgrade the bodies of your dudes. And it feels like that's either going to be good or it's not.
Well,
to
okay.
me.
How about this? Think of it this way. That 1-of is your mind meld, right? think like
Yeah.
because you don't need to play it on turn 1. You can just be a card in your deck, and suddenly you realize on turn 13 or whatever, you look down and you see, wait, I have concurrent timelines, and I have my Commander Ledros in hand.
Just get there.
I'm just gonna play it, and then I'm gonna play the Commander Ledros because you can do both of those on the same turn.
Yeah.
And that's gonna a non-zero amount of times win you a game you wouldn't have otherwise won. I think that's the
But why not just play
idea here.
3?
Yeah, that's definitely the idea. I don't know. I think it's probably not good for the same reason that Mind Meld wasn't that good. Though I guess we should maybe say that with a grain of salt because there was a lot of copies of Mind Meld in the top 32 of the seasonal tournament.
I think it wasn't great on ladder, and I think putting it in your seasonal tournament deck is a lot of upside.
Yeah. So, but regardless, that specific card gets more value the longer it's been in play. Right. So like if you play it on turn 1 and then play a creature every turn of the game until turn 9, you're going to get a lot of value out of that card. If you play it on turn 9 and you play it and then Commander Ledros, like you're going to get value out of it if you hit the Dreadway for sure. For sure. But you still missed out on a lot of that value, and that feels bad. We just talked, that's the kindly Tavern Keeper thing. Like I do not want to only get one trigger out of my concurrent timelines.
Yeah, that's fair. I will say that I feel like concurrent timelines is generally a trap. I have not seen that card be that impressive. I do think that there is an argument for putting just the one of in your deck as like a gotcha.
Yeah, I don't hate it, to be clear. Like I think it's fine.
It's just it goes from a build around to a spicy
gotcha.
one of
Yeah.
like a separate way to win the game that you wouldn't normally win. It's just functions differently in that scenario.
Yeah, you don't build your deck around it. You just build a good deck and then happen to include one concurrent timelines to maybe get there. Yeah, I don't hate it. I think that you would have to build your deck differently, but I don't hate it for sure. All right, next up from Tede, they ask, how are you approaching climbing this season? Any decks you feel perform better than others, game length regardless? P.S. Keep doing your great job. Thank you very much.
Oh, yeah. Love this question. Surprised we didn't make it question of the week. Love a little bit of flattery. Yeah.
So I haven't been playing all that much ladder just yet. I usually tend to wait till the meta settles a little bit because that's when I have the most fun with games. I don't know. I'm a little bit less of the like Brewmaniac guy.
Huge spike. Yeah.
And I really like knowing the meta and trying to play card, like knowing what my opponent's playing. I really, really like knowing the exact 40 card deck list of my opponent and my deck just when I like sit down and see the champions, right? Like those are the games that I enjoy the most. If I was strictly trying to climb, I'd be playing TF Fizz. I don't know. I mean, like all the Masters players basically just TF Fizz to the top. Admittedly, they got there before this Lysandra Trundle deck really emerged. So it might be much harder now, but Lysandra Trundle I think is a great second option. It's been showing really well. So
that's what I've been playing. Like I have generally positive win rates with deck I try out. I do think I was pretty even on LeBlanc Cipher, and like it's not the kind of deck I like to play because it has such polarized matchups that just like sometimes you just get like super.
Sometimes you just get rocked. Yeah.
I got rocked by a Felios Yasuo.
Yasuo.
He was playing the landmark that
Brutal.
is the spell that recalls things every turn.
Oh my god, really?
He played
That's
Solari.
so
He's
sick.
Played Solari Sun. What's the 3-mana one? The 1/2.
Solari Sun, or that's the
Solari
lifesteal one.
Priestess?
Solari Priestess.
Solari Priestess. Yeah, he played the same Solari Priestess like 4 times.
So sick.
There's a lot of meteor showers. I'm a little traumatized.
Oh yeah.
There's an Aphelios. The second Yasuo really got me. Like, yeah, it was a really grindy game in which like I looked down at my opponent's board and it was like 2 Eye of the Dragons, the monastery that creates the recall in your hand, the temple. What's it called?
Veil Temple.
Veil Temple.
Oh.
Yeah, Veil Temple. And I was just like, how
did
am I
I get
losing
here?
and how am I ever going to win?
How about you, Hugh?
After that anecdote, I completely forgot what I was going to say.
What are you laddering with?
Oh, that's right. I think that before in the like lower tiers, where people's play isn't quite as tight as like Diamond and such, Fiora Shen has been
Smoking people.
amazing and that deck in particular, because it's so effective at punishing misplays. And so when your opponent's play is generally, when they're making a little higher, more mistakes on average, it's much easier to beat them with a deck that can punish mistakes effectively. Like there are some decks that just, if your opponent screws up, it's hard to capitalize. And Fiora is
the rush.
yeah, like
Good
something
example.
like that. It was just a very does a very linear game plan, but Fiora is very good at capitalizing on your
It's
opponent's
like, oh, you
mistakes.
tapped out, you're dead. I
Yeah.
have I have sharp sight plus single combat.
Or if you
plus
make like
single
one
combat.
bad attack into a Fiora with sharp sight
Yeah.
or whatever, it's just
And all of a sudden,
over.
like they go single combat, or single combat,
Yeah,
concerted strike. Like
Yeah,
and
you just get
lose.
blown out. You can just get blown out by that deck so easily if you make one mistake. So I totally buy that.
Yeah,
All right. Next up, Time asks, what is the new card with the biggest impact on the meta so far?
The card I've seen in the most decks is Blighted Ravine, and that card sucks.
Is it Lysandra?
I
So far,
I
Probably
on,
Lysandra.
I think it's Lysandra right now.
nailed it once again.
Yeah. Well,
Yeah.
yeah. I shockingly, I guess that I'm quite surprised that that's our answer, and I think that we're probably going to have a different answer by this time next week if we ask the same
Probably.
question again. But yeah, right now today, I think the answer is Lysandra.
Yeah, I think a little bit ago it was Azir. Like there were Azir decks everywhere,
Yeah.
and there are still a ton of Azir decks. But
really funny.
Lysandra beats the Azir decks.
I don't think I've
Shard.
seen a single Azir. I don't think
Really?
I've played against a single Azir.
I played against like 5 in a row yesterday.
wow, that's crazy.
Yeah, there was a whole period of ladder where I was just beating Azir Lucian players with Lysandle.
Lysandle.
Yeah.
Lysandle's a really good name. We're gonna
short
have to
name.
keep that. All right, next up from
The
Lee
other
McLeod.
option was
so sorry.
Trandra.
That's
No.
way worse.
Wait,
Beginning of
wait.
Trundle.
I think
the
it should
end
be
of Lysandra.
Trissandra. I think it should be Trissandra.
This is a
Trissandra?
terrible discussion.
Trissandra. Trissandra.
Next question.
Lysandle is where it's at.
Lee McLeod asks, the Zillion cards signal Void as the last faction. Any particular Void champs you are looking forward to?
Cho'Gath.
Malzahar, personally. And
Ooh.
Kassadin. Kassadin mostly. I forgot about Kassadin.
Kassadin's kind of
Like
yes,
Void
he is
touched.
Void.
He's
Yeah,
super Void, yeah.
yeah. He like went into the Void or something to like.
Are voids
I think he's Kaisa's dad
He's
or
Kaisa's
something.
dad,
His ultimate is called Rift Walk, and he like travels through the void, like disappears into the void. And then,
Yeah,
like, comes
and
back
like he
out.
like lost his Kaisa was his daughter, and he like lost her to the Void, and like tried to go get her back, and is now on like a. They like the Void people like ransacked their village or something, and
There's
now he's,
always a village to be ransacked. in the
yeah,
backstory.
and he's like trying to like find her or something, and he like probably thinks she's dead or I don't
I don't
know.
know.
Okay,
Yeah.
so the bugs like Cossacks are also void.
Yeah,
right?
yes.
There are like people that are void corrupted, and there's also like the bugs. Okay, cool.
I think
Yeah.
Kaisa is just like Void touched because she like grew up in the Void, and
Oh, I see.
Kassadin like took Void things and technology or something and uses armor.
Yeah, I don't know all the details, but I think
Cossacks
Kassadin would have a sweet Legends of Runeterra card. So
Rek'Sai, Cossacks, and Skarner are all sick, and I like them all.
Skarner's not.
Is Skarner not? He's
Skarner's
just an
not
actual
void.
he's
Scorpion.
from the Crystal.
I think he's
he's a
Shurima,
crystal
isn't he?
scorpion.
Oh yeah, he's Shuriman. Yeah,
Oh,
he's from
neat.
Shurima.
Okay,
Yeah.
Cool. Fun facts.
Anyway, bugs are pretty
He's
cool.
a bug,
though.
man.
I just
He
want
is
to see
a bug.
He's in the bug
Cho'Gath.
family.
I want to see Cho'Gath eat things and get big.
Yeah,
That would
yeah,
be
for sure.
so sick. Yeah,
Yeah,
I
like
can imagine
Context.
Cho'Gath. I'm just imagining the like one Cho'Gath that's all 6 of your unit spaces, and he's like a 40/40 with trample or whatever.
Yeah, that sounds great.
Yeah.
Full Timmy.
No,
Yeah.
he's just a 4-mana 5/4 with overwhelm. That's how they do champions now.
He's a 3-mana 5/2 with quick attack. He levels up when he's seen you deal 15 damage.
Oof.
Creates a 2-mana spell that says eat another ally.
So do they mean like the last region? Because I think the last region is Ixtal, right?
So it's looking like the last region is going to be Ixtal, and that the Void. I feel like the Void might just be like an
would-
antagonist. Like in the like we'll see.
I was thinking
cards.
like first expansion that isn't a whole region being like the Void and like like the Void and re-ups for the other things, because that's what I was thinking about. Is like other games have formats where cards from a specific period of time are legal. If they had not Foundations be legal, like Bilgewater, Targon, and Shurima would keep all of their cards, and the other regions would get like halved. Like all of those other 6 original regions would be unplayable. So it's like, I'm curious. Basically, I'm curious as to how they're going to do formats, because if they do it sequentially by time, they can't start doing that until well after the 10th region is released, because otherwise the end of your block is just going to be a ton of Shurima cards, and it's going to be really unbalanced.
Yeah, that is interesting, actually. I've not thought about that in the past. Perhaps they'll just like region lock it or something. Maybe they'll have like, this is the format where you can play Shadow Isles, Noxus, Piltover, and Zon, and Bilgewater, or like, maybe they'll just like split them into 5 and 5 or whatever, or maybe even like 7 and 7, or whatever's reasonable. That could be interesting.
Hope they just don't do a time locked. I hope they just keep things going. I don't know.
At least for now. I mean, Hearthstone didn't need to like implement a standard or anything
and
for multiple years.
As soon as Hearthstone's implemented standard, no one played Wild. No one played the old cards.
I don't think anyone's played Wild really basically since its inception. At least not really.
It's
not compared. Obviously people do, but yeah.
And then they just like made the market like more exploitative because suddenly like you had to have the new cards instead of like you could just play old decks.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think Hearthstone handled it pretty poorly when they had too big of a card pool. I hope that Legends of Runeterra, because it is something that will need to happen eventually in our game. Eventually the card pool will get too big and the decks are going to be too powerful, and you can't keep up with the power curve, basically.
Yeah, that's what I was thinking.
You don't want your game to turn into Yu-Gi-Oh!, which has never had a standard format in its entire lifespan, and every single time a new expansion comes out, the cards have to be better than the last one, otherwise nobody will play them.
And it already kind of happens because of the way regions work. It's not like Magic where you get new white cards for your white deck when there's a new thing. It kind of works like that, but also followers are often batched so that they're best with like Kindred's followers are best with Kindred. They're like killing your own units. Like that's a pretty bad example because those fit into a lot of Shadow Isles decks. But like, Quinn's scouts didn't really go into Fiora Shen, for example.
Yeah, absolutely.
And no Shurima cards or Bilgewater cards will ever go in Fiora Shen because that's not how the game works. So Fiora Shen is a deck that...
Yeah, it's not like you can just splash the Shuriman card or whatever.
You either need to have Shuriman cards create new archetypes that are as good or better than Fiora Shen, which is not particularly sustainable, or you need to have some kind or have it be time limited, because otherwise Fiora Shen will always be good unless you print a ton of cards that are better than it, and then it won't be. And it gets harder and harder to manage because the number of playable decks keeps expanding, and it was already obscenely large.
Yeah.
So I'm curious to see how they deal with it.
Absolutely. And last but not least, Dragon asks, now that you've had time to play with the new cards, which ones do you think you underestimated and overestimated? Blighted Ravine.
Okay, that card is bad. I just want to be very clear. I think he's insinuating that we were wrong and the card is good. The card sees a lot of play, but it's bad.
I think I remember saying that you're never going to play it over Avalanche, and that you're only going to play it if you want more Avalanches, which I think is where we're at. Like, I think people have decided that they do want 6 copies of Avalanche.
Yes, that's true.
Yeah.
People have been putting it in their decks instead of Avalanche. And
that
you look
is
at
bad,
2 of them in your hand, and you're like, I can't cast this with spell mana. And also, if I cast this now, they get to attack me, and then it goes off. The secret with that card is you just need to play it on your attack turn. But that's hard because if you pass and they have like 2 units in play, they can just pass back and open you. And if they don't want to develop into it, and if you open it, it's only ever going to hit those 2 units.
This card is going to get worse as people continue to learn to play around it, I think, too.
Okay. All right.
All
So
right, go.
Earlier, Noble mentioned, we were like, the question came up of what single card impacted the meta most, and Noble first said Blighted Ravine, and then we went on Lysandra because I think that's currently the actual right answer. I was going to say something about the Blighted Ravine comment, but I remembered that this was a question coming up later, so I let it pass.
All right.
I think that Blighted Ravine is not a bad card.
I don't think it's bad.
I think it's pretty good, actually.
4 unit mana. That's so many.
Okay.
I just think it's worse than Avalanche is all.
I don't think that's even necessarily...
You think it's better than Avalanche?
I'm not saying better. I'm saying different.
Side grade?
It's side grade. A very, very strict side grade. Like, it's very different. It plays much more similarly to Doomsayer from Hearthstone. Like...
That's pretty fair.
So think of it this way: like they have 2 creatures in play that are going to die to an avalanche. It's your turn. It's your turn 4. You have the attack token. If you just play this card, what do? They're playing a deck
they can't develop.
Yeah, I mean
they can't play creatures. And then like, what if they're a deck that can't use spell mana very effectively? What if what if your next turn is just like, this is only scary, I'm only afraid of losing this matchup if they develop now
that
and
makes
then
sense.
more next turn. Like you're inhibiting their ability to put more units on the board. If you play this card correctly, it gains you functionally 2 life because it 2s you when it activates. It
3 life if your Nexus is tough. Pew pew.
Yeah, there it is.
It just plays differently than Avalanche, and I think it's not at all unreasonable to find times where the meta will be in a place where you want 2 Avalanche and 3 Blighted Ravine, or
It's just
the
always-
opposite. Like,
It just feels so bad when you don't have the attack token.
well, you
Like it's just not
can't
good
play
there.
Yeah, or
that is a thing. Like Avalanche is very good at punishing it when you don't have the attack token and then developing. This card doesn't do that at all.
Sorry, I think that's not entirely true. I think there are plenty of times where like you can have like, what if you just have one Avarosan sentry and they have like a couple 2/1s and
They play
like
a 3/3 and then you
Draven.
can play this and suddenly you can like
Yeah, you can block their one thing that's dealing a decent chunk of damage, and then the rest of their things come in for some chip damage. And then
it
you
gets
play,
wiped
and you
away.
have your Blighted Ravine on the side, and like you wanted your Avarosan Sentry.
I'm
to
just
die
kind of
anyway.
mad because I think that card gets played a little more than it should be because it's just really not. I don't know. It's also very nicely dodges like barriers and temporary puff spells.
It dodges Spell Shield.
That is really relevant. Yeah.
It does dodge spell shield because of the way spell shield works, which is kind of weird.
Yeah.
Yeah, and like it does also pair well with stuff like Ice Shard and Withering Wail to be like, you have a bunch of creatures, I'm gonna play this, you can't develop more. Or if they do develop like 3 toughness creatures that they want to be able to open attack you with, then you get to Withering Wail them, and then it can like team up. That's another thing. Critical mass. Like I played a game where I used blocking with a Lysandra, an Avalanche, and a Blighted Ravine to kill their Lysandra. Like it was good. I won that game. Like these effects in Legendary Rare, because damage is permanent, do get better in multiples. Withering Wails and Vile Feasts and Avalanches means that you're going to kill a lot of 4/4s with just damage.
Yeah,
Absolutely.
I think in responding to the rest of this question,
Yeah, let's get back onto the actual question. What
this
cards
question
do we
wasn't
think
about Blighted
underestimated and are what cards do we think we underestimated and overestimated? Talking hard.
Yeah, I want to say that we may have overestimated. This might not be true. It might not have just found a home yet. We might have overestimated Jarvan.
Yeah, probably. I mean, I was like, I thought he was going to be like the best champion in the game. Like, I thought he was going to be like pretty game breakingly good. And he has not been that good. I still think he's been good. And I'm still excited to see like the meta develop a little bit more, because I'm pretty sure I'll be able to find a home for Jarvan in a meta like that. But it has not stood out as much as the other decks.
My opinion on Jarvan hasn't really changed. I think that his biggest problem was that he's a Demacia champion, and Demacia
basically
kind of sucks right now and has for a while, and that still has not changed, and therefore Jarvan is not great.
Yeah.
Unfortunate.
I think the card in a vacuum by himself is good, but he's in a subpar region at the
Yeah,
moment.
I would just rather be playing like I played him with Renekton, and I think that they're just better champions for like I'd rather be playing Renekton and LeBlanc, giving things vulnerable and killing them with LeBlanc.
Speaking of which, I think that Renekton is a champion that we underestimated as well. He's definitely been quite good. Like,
It took a while for me to see a game in which Renekton got put into play that he didn't win. And when I played Renekton, the only time I didn't win was when my opponent had a Renekton, and the same was true. That was because I was playing a Renekton deck and it was early and people wanted to play with the Grok.
I just think I think he's pretty good. Turns out he's just big, and it's just hard to deal with things that are that big. This expansion
Spinner,
really
good.
this expansion really made me kind of realize how hard dealing with various 4 or 5 toughness things is in Legends of Runeterra right now.
It's very difficult.
There's like, it's mostly 2 power, 3 power things floating around, like with elusive and dealing 2 damage or 3 damage at a time at most, right? Like it's really hard. Like Ruin Runner, that card's like completely unkillable. Like I don't know how I'm ever supposed to kill it. I've never had just 4 power and play to block it, right? Like it just doesn't happen that often. And so like Renekton's just huge, and I think I definitely underestimated just how big these cards actually are. So that's my underestimation.
Like Rockhopper and Bakai Sandspinner have also been good.
Yep.
People have been playing Ruthless Predator over Exhaust, which I think is a little weird. It costs twice as much mana.
Ruthless Predator is... I really think that card is not good. I'm going to say it. I just do not like that card.
People are playing with Overwhelm, and it's just like +2 damage, which is kind of what you want, which is pretty good.
Yeah,
But,
it's
like,
true.
Yeah, I agree. It just never seems good to me.
Yeah, it just doesn't seem that good. I don't know. I think like Exhaust is really good. Like that card is just so efficient. So you can just put it in your decks and it tends to do the same job, but it's only 1 mana.
Yeah. Rockhopper also impressed me, like I said.
Yeah, that card's great too.
Yeah,
powerful.
same. I agree. I don't know.
Alrighty. Yeah. I think that that brings us to the end of this episode. You guys have anything else you want to tack on at the end here before we call it a day?
Is that everything?
That was everything.
Awesome.
Yeah.
Well, we're going to play a lot of Legends of Runeterra, and we're going to have like a little over a week to do it.
Wait. We missed one.
I missed one. Which one did I miss?
Twilight's question, right? Which, in your opinion,
You're
is
right.
the best
You're absolutely
emote
right.
coming
Thank you.
tomorrow, and why is it Laughing Nasus one? No.
I really like Laughing Nasus.
It is very good.
He's good.
It's very good. But how, in what universe
That's the
is
sound that he
Azir
makes.
literally throwing salt on you? Not the best emote. That
It's
emote,
really good.
that emote,
Convinced me to buy the
S tier?
pass. That emote convinced me to buy the pass.
Same. This is the first battle
Never
pass.
owned an emote before.
This is the first battle pass I've ever bought in any game I have ever played, period. And it was for that emote.
Yeah.
That is an S tier emote, without a doubt.
It's in its own league. I think it's
You think it's S plus tier?
I think
You think it's tier 0?
I think it's
Tier 0
think it's
emote
better
must
than-
be nerfed.
Jinx?
Oh yeah.
I wish we were doing this live because
I
I'm
still
doing some
think
really
that
good visuals
I
over
still
here.
think the Jinx emote is the best one in the game. I don't think that opinion is almost ever going to change. Probably. I'm
Jinx is
really
really-
I have a lot of good memories with the Jinx emote. I just made it my my like sub alert for the stream is the like Jinx, is the Jinx emote. And I'm really
Awesome.
excited about it.
Would you say that your opinion of how good that emote is would change a little bit if it was paid versus free?
Probably. I probably would just have like not used it if it wasn't free.
I do like
So
how
I just have memories with it now, though. You know,
That's fair,
I'm
yeah.
associated. I just love that emote.
Yeah. I do like how disturbing Sexy Fizz is.
Wait.
Don't understand.
Wait
like,
a second.
Wait a
Are you
second.
talking about his like defined cheeks?
Yeah, wait. That's what that emote is called. Don't lie to yourself. That emote is Sexy Fizz.
What
He looks so coy.
are you talking about?
He looks so coy.
He's just
Wait.
No. Well, he looks like a fish, the koi fish.
Wait a second. What is there? Okay, I don't live
I'm
with
looking
you
up.
two anymore.
This is new to me too, man.
is there some inside joke here?
I'm looking up the fizz
Fizz
emote.
looks just
Do
like
you-
weirdly like
Do we just is
sexual.
There, are
That's
we,
all I'm saying.
I'm looking up the
That's all I'm
fizz
saying.
emote. All right,
Are
let's
we
take a look.
learning? What?
Hugh, does this get you going? We're looking at the fizz emote right now. He's got some
I'm not
lips
saying
going.
that. It's just like
He's got like he's like
it's just
smirking.
such a, like
he's
it's
like
just such a I don't know.
You just
man.
think he looks provocative?
I think he
Not
can.
really,
I think
not
he
really.
knows he's like,
He's
oh,
like,
you messed up.
Hello. That's what that face is.
It
Look
does-
at that face.
It does look a little bit like he's about to walk up to you at a bar.
Have you seen
and hit
the
on you.
little
just a little bit?
the little like the motion? He's like winking and like it's quite disturbing.
Cat call fizz. Is that the emote?
Okay, I'm definitely disturbed. You're right. I don't know if it's by the fizz emote, but
All right, I want to thank you all for joining us on this episode of Champ Select. We're still offering our coaching program, so if you're interested, go ahead and send us an email at champselectpodcast@gmail.com. There's a description and details in the description to whatever platform you're listening to this on. As well, you should follow our Discord. We've got our Discord approaching 100 people in it right now, and we've got some pretty exciting giveaways planned as soon as it hits 100 people. So everyone out there listening, make sure you join the Discord if you want to be a part of those giveaways. So without further ado, I want to thank you all for joining us on this episode of Champ Select, and we'll see you all next week.